Hello students, welcome to Royal Palace PU College, Jamkhandi online classes. My name is Sanjay sir and I'll be teaching you biology sir. As you know that we have already started a chapter called as PUC second year, chapter number 14, the ecosystem. We have studied some of the basic concepts of this chapter and today we'll be studying one of the important topic of this chapter called as flow of energy in an ecosystem. This is also one of the necessary topic of this chapter and will slowly point by point, one by one study everything that is necessary here. Like all the videos, once again let me tell you that I'll be concentrating only on NCERT and each and every line of NCERT. I'll not be adding any unwanted, unnecessary lines because this channel is strictly based on NCERT syllabus only. So let's get started. As the topic itself indicates that there is movement of energy and this movement of energy takes place in a lot of sectors. We'll be seeing this thing in physics, chemistry and even in biology. When we talk about biology, this movement of energy should have to include organisms, and likewise the chief source of energy or the bestest content from which each and every organism is dependent upon is producers or the plants or the autotrophs, etc., etc. As I have already mentioned in my previous videos that because of the plants we are still surviving. You may be a vegetarian organism or a non-vegetarian organism or the planet filled with a lot of these organisms. But each and everything, each and every organism is dependent directly or indirectly upon these plants. So the point number one here to remember is that for all the ecosystems of our planet, who is the main source of energy? We know for a fact that they are producers, but they do their work by taking a process called as photosynthesis, and that is done by the utilization of sunlight. This topic is somewhere equivalent to the previous topic, but we need to understand this one also. So point number one is the chief source of energy of all the ecosystems depending on this planet Earth is the sun. The sun has got so many radiation, the sun has got so many importance, the sun has got so many respect to this planet Earth. Instead of sun, it's not possible for any kind of work with respect to animals, organisms, plants, etc., etc. So sunlight has got utmost importance to our ecosystem. Let us consider 100% of solar radiation falls onto the planet Earth. Out of this 100% falling of sunlight onto the planet Earth, let's call this as a word called as incident radiation. Since this word is connected to sunlight, let us call this word as incident solar radiation. I'm not saying the entire 100% of the sunlight enters our Earth. I'm just saying that the proportion, whatever the proportion it may be, let us consider that proportion of incident radiation as 100%. Out of that, 50% will be useful for the work of photosynthesis by the plants. And this 50% incident solar radiation is called as photosynthetically active radiation. There is a short form for this called as PAR. Remember, I am talking about a very sensible point. And what is that? Considering the maximum incident radiation falling onto the surface of Earth, out of which only 50% of sunlight is useful for the purpose or for the work of photosynthesis by the plants. Remember, 50% of incident radiation for photosynthetically active radiation done for photosynthesis. Okay, so PAR is how much? 50% only. And out of this photosynthetically active radiation, that is PAR of 50%, the plants utilize only 2 to 10% of this PAR. Remember, these are very basic contents. Out of so much of radiation which is exhibited from the sun, 50% enters into the planet Earth just for the assumption of it, and out of which only 2 to 10% of this PAR is utilized by the plants for the photosynthetic work. Some other incident radiation will be falling onto the other organisms as a substrate radiation, but as far as the plants are concerned, they'll utilize only 2 to 10%. With the utilization of this much of sunlight, they undergo photosynthesis, they produce the food. We call them as producers, you already know, and from this producer the chain continues to consumers. These consumers may be primary, secondary, tertiary, supreme, predators, etc., etc. Now once again, the flow of energy in our ecosystem from one organism to another organism takes place in the form of food. Of course, food. If an organism eats plants, if an organism eats another organism, we say that the energy got transferred, maybe from the plants or maybe from other organism. So the flow of energy in an ecosystem transfers from one organism to another organism in the form of food only. So considering plants which do the photosynthesis, and the energy is present in the form of biomass in the body of plants. Now when the herbivores or the primary consumers eat these plants, the energy will be transferred into that herbivore or primary organism in the form of food only. Now this primary consumer is being eaten by the secondary consumer, and once again the energy is transferred from this primary consumer to the secondary consumer in the form of food only. Now the question is, sir, if we eat a banana considering 100% of it, sir, is it that 100% will be converted as energy in the form of food? As far as energy is concerned, yes, it will be converted. But as far as biomass is concerned, it won't be that percentage. Why? Because to do any kind of metabolic activity, any kind of metabolic reaction in any of the organism, there is a need of utilization of energy. And when that energy wants to be utilized, it should be in the form of food. So if that one banana considering 100%, out of that 50%, 60%, 80% will be used for the metabolic activities only, and the rest energy and the rest content of the banana will only be stored as the biomass. Though it is giving the energy in the form of 100% of banana, it won't be saved as biomass as 100% of it. Why? Because a lot of content of that banana will be used for the metabolic activities, and in the form of heat it gets lost. The organism wants to walk, the organism wants to run, the organism wants to hunt, the organism wants to eat, the organism wants to see, the organism wants to do a lot of activities, and all those activities are dependent on the metabolic reactions, and these metabolic reactions are dependent on the energy. So this energy will be done by eating another organism in the form of plant or animal. Energy will be continued, but the biomass will not be continued. If an organism gets the biomass, then it should eat a lot of things, a lot of organisms, and a lot of content in it. Once again, let me repeat the same content. Energy can be transferred from one organism to another organism in the form of a full energy, 100% energy, but as far as the biomass is concerned, that biomass will be stored as the last left energy, because majority part of the energy will be used for metabolic activities, and it is lost in the form of heat. And it can be proposed with respect to second law of thermodynamics also. We studied thermodynamics in physics and chemistry. I hope you'll be remembering it. But anyways, let me refresh it once again. The movement or the transfer of energy takes place from hotter body to a colder body. Let me repeat. The movement or the transfer of heat energy moves from one thing to another thing, one organism to another organism, one object to another object, one cell to another cell, one organ to another organ, one content to another content, from a hotter region to a colder region. It's quite impossible from a colder region to transfer its heat energy into a hotter energy, from a colder body to a hotter body. It's not possible. So the flow of energy should be from the hotter object to a colder object. So likewise, if any organism wants to do any kind of metabolic activities, it should be done from the hotter region of that body to a colder region of that body. So of course, loss of energy takes place. Dear students, once again let me go to the same old topics, which looks a little boring, but these are the basics. Since we are talking about energy flow, once again I have to take the same concepts again and again. So let's get started to the same topic again and again, right? So here the organisms such as plants, these are called as autotrophs, these are called as producers, and these producers do their own food, produce their own food, manufacture their own food, and that manufacturing process is called as photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is done by or in the presence of sunlight. Doing a lot of chemical reactions, we have already studied in PUC first year photosynthesis chapter, but done. So plants are called as producers, they do the photosynthesis, they provide energy and source of biomass to the entire ecosystem or the entire world or the planet Earth. Now these are completely given the sources of the consumers. Consumers, because of the producers, they are living. Otherwise, consumers will not live at all. Consumers will die. So in case of consumers, let me tell you, these are called as heterotrophs. These are completely dependent on producers, and their life is sustainable only in the presence of producers. Otherwise, there is no existence for the consumers. In case of consumers, we have got three categories: primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. Sometimes even we go for the further topic called as the predator. So in case of consumers, these are heterotrophic organisms. These cannot prepare their own food for their growth and development. They are completely dependent on the plants or other organisms, right? So let us go with the first point of consumer, that is primary consumer. So who are primary consumers? Primary consumers are nothing but herbivores. These are vegetarian organisms, and these are also heterotrophs only, and these are completely dependent on plants. Remember, plants. The life of primary consumers or the herbivores is completely dependent on plants. Okay, vegetarian organisms such as rabbit, deer, etc., etc. Point number 2, secondary consumers. These are once again heterotrophic organisms. These cannot prepare their own food for their growth and development, and these are completely dependent on primary consumers. These are called as carnivorous organisms, because the primary consumers are called as the herbivorous organisms, vegetarian. Carnivorous means non-vegetarian organisms. These survive by eating the vegetarian organisms such as primary consumers only. Let's go to the third content, that is tertiary organisms or tertiary consumers. These are the organisms which completely dependent on the secondary consumers and sometimes primary consumers also. These are also heterotrophic, and they are completely dependent on these two things, that they are primary and secondary consumers. Dear students, I hope you are understanding my topics, because sometimes it feels a little boring, ecology a little boring, but try to get it in such a way that a little boring line will be in your future times, maybe asked in NEET examinations. The point that you left as bored right now will be asked for 4 marks in your NEET examinations. So that's why whatever the boring it may be, stay calm, stay focused, and listen to whatever the line that is coming from my mouth. Let us go to the last line of this topic, and that is Lindemann's 10% law. One of the important law, one of the basics law, and one of the needed to be understanding law, basic law of ecology, you can say. So what is the meaning of Lindemann's law, or what this law states actually? Let us consider the trophic levels. The trophic levels, remember them: producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. So I have given 1, 2, 3, 4 stages of trophic levels, right? So the energy should be transferred from producers to primary consumers, primary to secondary consumers, secondary to tertiary consumers. So when the energy enters from stage 1, that is producers to primary consumers, the energy will be lost. I explained previously. When the energy from the producers enters into the first trophic level to second trophic level, that is primary consumers, the energy will be entered in an ecosystem considering the trophic levels. As the first trophic level as the producers, that is plants, the energy should be transferred to the primary consumers, and the total energy transferred from producers to primary consumers is only 10%. Why? Because from the sunlight, it utilized the sunlight to do the photosynthesis, that is true. It produced food, that is also true. But it also needs some basic energy to do its own metabolic activities, right? I explained previously. So it needs its own huge amount of energy just for its own metabolic activities. So a lot of energy is lost there only. So if an organism of the primary consumer level eats the plants, and 10% of energy will be transferred. Now that organism is being eaten by another organism called a secondary consumer, and once again from primary consumer to secondary consumer, only 10% of the energy will be transferred, because this organism, this animal will also be doing its own metabolic activities. So a lot of energy will be wasted there also, right? So once again from the secondary consumer to tertiary consumer, because it will also get eaten by the tertiary consumer, no? So when the energy transfers from secondary to tertiary, once again only 10% of energy will be transferred, just by thinking that to do a lot of metabolic activities, the energy will be lost in the form of heat energy, or to do those chemical reactions, the energy is utilized there only. So the Lindemann's 10% law, in an ecosystem of trophic levels wherein which from one organism to another organism, if at all energy is being transferred, it is only 10%. Do not forget it. Students, this is the photo which is given in our NCERT textbook as a reference of flow of energy in an ecosystem. We have already started a chapter called as chapter number 14, the ecosystem. And today we'll be studying a new topic of this, and that is ecological pyramids. One of the easiest topic which has been asked so many times in our theory examinations, and some of the questions even had been asked in our NEET examinations too. I'll let you know in between the stages which and all are important for the sake of theory and for the sake of NEET examination. So let's get started. To begin with, the first thing is that we already know what is a beautiful relationship between a producer and a consumer. As far as producer is concerned, I'll be taking only one name, such as the autotrophs or the plants. These are so called as producers because they do the photosynthesis by utilizing the sunlight. These are the major sources of energy to the entire biosphere. I already mentioned so many related topics like this in my previous videos. Now, the flow of energy transfers from these producers to the another organisms called as consumers. Consumers, as I mentioned already and explained already, that these are those organisms which are not at all independent, they are dependent on other organisms such as producers. In case of consumers, we can divide so many organisms such as primary, secondary, tertiary and predators. So without the help of producers, the consumers cannot live. They may be primary, secondary or tertiary. And without the help of decomposition process, once again, those minerals or elements will not enter into the soil and the plant will not grow. So it's like a chain or a cycle which is happening in between the living and non-living components of our life. So if, coming to the topic, if the relationship between the consumer and the producer the one who is producing and the one who is eating, if the relationship between these two organisms, if it is graphically represented in the form of a pyramid, then it is called as ecological pyramid. Pyramid, you already know that it is a triangular shape, and ecological means we have added producers to consumers. Now, in case of ecological pyramids, as the structure itself indicates, that it has got one broad bottom surface and one tapered apex. In case of broad basal or bottom surface, will always be adding the producers, and in the apex position will be adding the higher consumers. It's very simple. I repeat, the bottom or the first trophic level should always be filled with the producers, or this position is specifically for producers. And as on the growth of the pyramid takes place, those second, third, fourth or fifth positions will be taken by the consumers. You have to understand these things, then only you'll be saying that I know the basics of ecological pyramids. Now the next thing, how many types are there in case of ecological pyramids? In case of our NCERT textbooks and explanations, we see totally 3 types of ecological pyramids. Let us list them. 1. Pyramid of number. 2. Pyramid of biomass. And 3. Pyramid of energy. Let us study each one of them. So, first one is pyramid of numbers. First, a simplest definition, the relationship between the producer and the consumer can be graphically represented in the form of a pyramid. In terms of numbers is called as pyramid of numbers. So, the explanation is very simple. Let us go to a diagram called as the pyramid. Let us add the trophic levels, trophic level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. In the one or the first position or the basal position, we'll add producers or the plants. After that, we'll add primary consumers, secondary and tertiary consumers, and in the end, predators too. Now, how many plant species, how many plants, how many plant varieties, or how many total number of plants are present in case of producers gives us one number. How many herbivorous, how many primary consumers, how many vegetarian organisms are present in the second trophical level gives us one number. How many secondary consumers are there? How many these carnivorous organisms who can eat the herbivorous animals which are present in the third trophic level gives us one number. Likewise, tertiary consumers, likewise predators. So in each and every trophic level, we see numbers. It indicates how many, remember how many organisms are there in each and every trophic level. It gives us one understanding so that we can easily proceed through these ecological pyramids with respect to number. Interesting fact is that if you go from producers to higher trophic levels of the consumers, the number always decreases, and that's why it takes the shape of a pyramid, which means that in case of terrestrial ecosystem, wherein which the dominant species are plants, takes up the highest position in the ecological pyramids. That's why I mentioned in the beginning itself that in case of ecological pyramids, the basal part will always be the producers, and that will be done by the plants only. So the number of secondary consumers are more than the tertiary consumers. The number of primary consumers are more than the secondary consumers, and the number of producers or primary producers or the autotrophs or the plants is more as the primary consumers, and so on. It just depends upon our own interest of understanding that the complete pyramid is based on the arrangement of producers and consumers with respect to their numbers. I hope you are understanding it. Let us go to another simplest form called as the pyramid of biomass. In case of pyramid of biomass, once again the same kind of definition. The relationship between producers and consumers can be graphically represented in the form of a pyramid, with respect to biomass or in terms of biomass is called as the pyramid of biomass. Now the first thing is, sir, what do you mean by biomass? Consider a rabbit, and this rabbit weighs around 10 kgs. Consider only one rabbit is there, that itself is called as biomass of that particular area. Consider two rabbits are there, each weighing 10 kgs. Now what is the biomass? 2 rabbits into 10 kgs gives you 20 kg. That is the biomass of that area, specific area. Consider 10 rabbits are there. Now 10 rabbits each weighing 7, 8, 9, 10 variety of kgs. So what is the biomass there? All those rabbits and their individual weights gives you the biomass. So what is the meaning of biomass? Biomass is nothing but the weight of organisms, of variety of organisms, of that particular area and of that particular trophic level. Remember this thing. I am not saying rabbits of the whole world. I am saying the rabbits of that particular area. And we are keeping rabbits in specific trophic level, that is in the second trophic level called as the herbivores or the vegetarian organisms or primary consumers. Remember, the same goes with respect to secondary consumers by taking an example of tiger. The same example goes with respect to tertiary consumers by taking an example of lion, etc. etc. Biomass is nothing but if one organism is there, 10 organisms are there, 100 organisms are there, what is the total quantity, what is the total size, what is the total weight of all those organisms with respect to their trophic levels and their specific position. Now in case of biomass ecological pyramids, we see two types. One as the upright and another one as the inverted. Let us go with the first one called as upright ecological pyramid of biomass. It is very simple as with respect to all the other ecological pyramids. It occurs in the terrestrial ecosystem. It starts by taking grass as the producers, and from the grass we'll take one food chain example here. From the grass to the deer, from the deer to the fox, and from the fox to the tiger or the lion. It is the simplest chain which gives us the basic idea that it is a pyramid like structure, right? It is a basic thing or a basic pyramid which gives us a basic example of all the variety of ecological pyramids. Start from producers, producers are heavy in number, and as on the pyramid increases, their other consumer sizes or the numbers decreases. But here we are taking the weights. Actually, what is the weight? We are considering the weight in each and every individual trophic levels. We are not considering numbers here, we are considering weight. Why? The heading itself is the ecological pyramid of biomass. Simple, right? Let us consider the important section of this topic called as inverted ecological pyramid of biomass. Generally, remember, generally this type of ecological pyramid of biomass occurs in the aquatic ecosystem. So to perform any kind of ecological pyramid, what do we need first thing? What and all points we need? We need producers. After that, we need primary, secondary, tertiary consumers. In case of aquatic system, do we see the plants in the larger quantities? No. The plants will not be present in the higher amounts in case of aquatic ecosystem or in a river or in a pond or in an ocean. So the concentration or the quantity of plants is completely less in case of aquatic ecosystem, or the number or the weight or the concentration of phytoplanktons is completely less in case of the aquatic ecosystem. That's why the size or the position will be as like that only, but the size of that particular trophic level decreases in a shortened way. You can observe in the photo here. But eating these phytoplanktons, I told you phytoplanktons, these are nothing but plants and the floating structures. By eating these phytoplanktons, the beneficiaries are primary consumers and their concentration is more. And eating these primary consumers, there will be secondary consumers and their concentration is more than that of the primary consumer. And once again, eating these secondary consumers, tertiary consumers are there and their concentration is further more than the secondary consumers. So you can get an idea here. The inverted pyramid is completely opposite than that of the upright pyramid. Positions are same, but the sizes of those particular trophic levels are changed. That's why in case of ecological pyramid of biomass, the aquatic ecosystem has got inverted structure. Why? Because the producers such as phytoplanktons are very less. Don't forget this, very less. That's why they are in the first basic position with the small size, and it gives the shape of inverted pyramid in nature. I hope you're understanding it. Let us go to the third one, that is called as ecological pyramid of the energy. Once again, same kind of a definition, the relationship between a producer and a consumer, which can be graphically represented in the form of energy or in terms of energy, is called as pyramid of energy. In case of pyramid of number, we took with respect to number, how many number of organisms are there. In case of pyramid of biomass, we took weight as the important aspect. What is the weight? What is the biomass of the individual organisms or the group of organisms of the trophic level? In case of this, that is the pyramid of energy, will be considering what is the total amount of energy which is being transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level. In this case itself, we studied the Lindemann's 10% law in the previous video. Go there and check it out. So once again, a normal table, a normal pyramid, the bottom is heavier, filled with a lot of producers, and the apex contains the tapered structure filled with predators or the tertiary consumers. In all the sections, there will be organisms, but we are not considering the total number of organisms and the total number of weight or the total weight. We are considering how much amount of energy is being transferred from one place to another place. In numbers, we are not using any particular units. In case of weight, we are using the weight as the kgs or the grams, and in case of the energy, we are using the joules. It can be represented in joules or kilojoules, and it is always upright in nature, because each and every time from one place to another place, from producer to consumer, consumer to other places, if the energy is flowing, majority of the part is being lost in the form of heat itself. I already mentioned and explained in my previous video. Once again, go and check that video and try to understand it. Now, these are all the basic examples. In your theory examinations also, there will be a question, what do you mean by ecological pyramid? Explain the different types. They will be asking it for 5 marks. A simplest example or simplest explanation, draw all the diagrams, write all the points, done. In case of NEET, as far as my knowledge is concerned, they might be asking you a question with respect to ecological pyramid of biomass with respect to the upward and inward structures. I hope you understood these basic points of ecological pyramid. Let us go to the last section of this video, that is called as limitations of ecological pyramids. Limitations. Point number 1. In case of ecological pyramids of the trophic levels, some organisms may take a position of primary consumers and can also be taking another position in secondary consumers also. Or some organisms may be present in tertiary consumers. They can take the position of the secondary consumer position also. The ecological pyramids will not give you the idea about those organisms which are present in 2 to 3 different trophic levels. It takes into consideration of only and only those organisms which are present only in one trophic level itself. If an organism is present in the second trophic level and also in third trophic level, it will not take into consideration. That is one of the fault of the ecological pyramids. Let us go to point number 2. Ecological pyramids explains us the relationship between producer and consumer. Good. It says that from producer to consumer, there are so many stages and there is a flow of number, weight and energy. That is also good. It takes an example of one food chain and explains all these varieties. Done. Here is the problem. If it is taking only one food chain, then all these 3 types of ecological pyramids are wonderful to explain. But in the nature, only one kind of robotic food chain will not happen. in our system there will be multiple different types of food chains will occur with different climatic conditions. So in case of food chain explanation, ecological pyramids holds correct. But in case of food web explanation, ecological pyramids will not hold any good conditions, which means that ecological pyramids can be good for explaining only one type of single type of food chain. From this is being eaten by this one, this one, this one. But what about the second one is eaten by another organism in the third one, and third one is eaten by another organism in the fourth one? There will be a variety of carnivorous organisms who can eat herbivorous, right? So there will be multiple types of food chains called as food web. So ecological pyramids will not give that kind of information. That is another minus point with respect to ecological pyramids. Let us go to third point. As I mentioned in the beginning itself, the topic of decomposition or the role of bacteria, fungi, the decomposers, saprotrophs, etc., detritivores. The role of these organisms is basic, needed to our system, to our environment. These do the decomposition process and helps the nature to maintain its own minerals, its own elements, micro, macro, its own nutrients in the system. In spite of having all this kind of heaviest, important, needed work by the decomposers, the ecological pyramids will not give any kind of position for the decomposers. That is one of the problem of ecological pyramids. Once again, let me repeat, the ecological pyramid does not give any position for the decomposers. So